want to create a culture of evangelism in our church. That should be the goal for every pastor. Why? Well, because most churches don't have a culture of evangelism. Most churches have come so far away from having a culture of evangelism that that culture of evangelism is not even a dot on the horizon. I mean, it's gone so far that most people today that are in your church, they see church as a destination. All right? I go to church. I serve at church. Man, even good members serve at church. Brothers, amen, givers, I give at church. We love them, don't we? I mean, that's your top-rated members, right? But even most of them, when they leave the church, they say, I'll see you next time. And they go about their daily life. Not that they've gone off the deep end or they're doing anything terrible or they're in such sin, but they're just living their life. They're taking care of their job. They're taking care of their kids. They're doing stuff. And I'll see you back at church. My church time is on Sunday. I'll check that off and be back, and I'll be one of your best members. But they never think about, when I leave the church, I'm walking out into my mission field. We were talking about this at our table when we were answering some of these questions. We're like, what's one of the greatest needs of the church? Well, our stumbling blocks is most people aren't sharing their faith today. That's just reality. Latest statistics will tell us that only 3 to 5% of your people in church will ever share their faith with a lost person. Think about that for a minute. That means 95 to 97% of your people are not sharing their faith, will not share their faith. But here's the scary part. For most of your people, it's not even on their radar. It's not even a thought. And so what do we have to do to begin to move back in the other direction to say, man, we have become so far from what the original intent and for following God's command and fulfilling the Great Commission as a church. What do we need to do to begin to move in the other direction so that we can be a church who's living on mission, not just a church, hear me say this, okay? Not just a church that does events that are outward focused or has a few things like that. Now, those are good and those are important. You should do outreach events, all right? I'm not an evangelism guy telling you not to do outreach events. You should do outreach events. But here's what I'm saying. That does not change the evangelistic culture of your church. Here's what happens. Hey, we want to do something evangelism. All right, let's do a fall festival. Great. Get the fall festival together. We're going to get all the church people. We're advertising. Got 1,000 people show up at our fall festival, yeah? Well, you know what? 500 of those have been to every fall festival in your area over the last week, you know. But here's the thing. We feel good about ourselves because, man, we had this great event. Went well. Maybe if you do something like a wild game start, maybe we saw some people get saved. Hallelujah. But what happens as soon as that outreach event's over, we're right back to where it's normal. Oh, check that off the list. Moving on. Think about when you do an evangelism training. Listen, I love to do evangelism trainings for your church. I will come do an evangelism training for your church. That's part of what I do. But listen, we'll do an evangelism training. Y'all come. We're going to do an evangelism training. Y'all come. We push. As soon as that evangelism training happens, though, we're right back to where we were. And we never changed the culture, but we feel better about ourselves because we tried. We made an attempt. But here's what I found, even as a pastor, and I mean many pastors here may feel the same way. Pastors get frustrated because they say things like, well, we tried to do something. We tried to get our people excited about evangelism. And nothing ever took. Nothing ever happened. I mean, we did this event, we did this training, and nothing ever happened. But here's the key, guys. To create a culture of evangelism in your church, to really get your people to be more evangelistically minded, more evangelistically focused, and more evangelistically intentional as they live their life day to day, what it takes is a constant, gentle push in the right direction. In evangelism, more than any other area of your church, as soon as you take your hand off the plow, off the back, evangelism ceases to exist. Because my people don't want to do it in the first place. They're scared. They don't know how. They're afraid of what might happen. They have all of these negative thoughts. There's, I can't share my faith because, fill in the blank, 100 different reasons, right? And so they don't want to do it. Secondly, it's a spiritual battle. The enemy doesn't want you to do it. I think there's a lot of things in church, not trying to be blasphemous here. I think there's a lot of things we do in church that the enemy could care less about. He's like, y'all go ahead. You're good, man. You're not bothering me a bit. But you get serious about trying to mobilize your people to go into the fields and to make and reach lost people, the enemy's going to get stirred in your church. He's going to come against you and oppose you. He doesn't want to lose his people, right? So he's going to do whatever he can to fight you on that. So I've got to have a plan in place. I've got to be intentional to move my people that way. And so how do we do that? That's what we want to talk about today, all right? How do we create a culture of evangelism in our church? You've got your handout here. And I want you to fill in the blank. But again, as you fill this out, don't get overwhelmed, all right? Because I know in a limited time, I would love to have time to maybe discuss a lot of this along the way and kind of walk with you, but we don't have the time to do that today. But again, I will come to you and work with your people to do that, all right? So make sure you hear that. All right, so the first thing, though, it all starts with this. It all starts first, pastors, with pastor intentionality. Pastors, you've got to be intentional about it. It's got to be a part of your life if you want your people to have it. And so it's very important that the pastor has this idea and this thought and this passion to want to reach lost people themselves. Pastors, I just want to say this. Let me throw this out there. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings this early in the game, but let me just say this. If the only people you ever lead to Christ are people who come down your aisle because somebody invited them to church, you're missing the fullness of what God wants for you as an evangelist. What did Paul tell Timothy? Do the work of an evangelist. As pastors, we have to do the work of evangelist. Well, that's not my gift. I more want to focus on this. All right, that's fine. If you're not gifted, you know what? That's what your people say a lot. Well, that's not my gift, evangelism. Listen, it doesn't have to be your gift. It's your calling. We have the calling to be a minister of reconciliation. Every single believer. If you've been reconciled, 2 Corinthians 5, you have the ministry of reconciliation. So even if that's not your gifting, listen, I feel like evangelism is one of my gifts. But here's what I think about evangelism giftedness. It's not so much that means I just run around and tell people about Jesus, which I like to do that too. But it also means that I can spur and train and help others get excited about wanting to share their faith. That's my passion. I want to mobilize members and followers of Christ to be out there doing it and help them to taste and see how awesome it is when God uses you to make a difference in somebody else's life. So pastors, your intentionality is huge. So think of yourself as the thermostat, right? You're not just the thermometer that gauges the temperature. You're the thermostat to set the temperature of evangelism in your church, okay? So let me ask you a question. I know we kind of asked this question a little bit, but it's a little bit different. I just want you to ask. Nobody has to answer this out loud per se. But on a scale of 1 to 10, pastors, and when I say pastors, I'm talking to the whole room. I know everybody's not officially a pastor of a church in here today, but listen, we're all church leaders, right? We're all leaders. So as I say that, this includes the whole room, all right? But let me ask you a question. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being ice cold, 10 being, man, I'm boiling hot over the top, where would you put your evangelism fervency right now personally? How fervent for evangelism are you right now? Just think about that for a second. Where are you? I want y'all to know something. I do small groups with pastors where I'll meet with 3 pastors once a month for 6 months, and we kind of walk through this thing. A lot of it's just accountability. But one of the first things I ask these pastors is this. Hey, I ask them that question. Where's your evangelism fervency right now? Do you know what I've heard? And just about to a man. I won't say every single pastor I work with, but to a man, the ones that have been in my group so far, it's been in that 4 to 6 range. 4, maybe 5. Some have been a little less, some have been a little more. But for the most part, it's almost like a general malaise among pastors. Like, well, I know I should do it, but I can't say that I'm really killing it right now. And so there's part of the issue with our churches not having a passion and a fire, if the pastors aren't excited about it. And so how do I raise that? Wherever you are right now, yours might be a little higher. I hope so. You might be at 8, 9. Great. But the question is, what can I do personally as a pastor to help raise the level of fervency in my own life? I want to cover some of those things today as we think about that. Let me reference NAM again. In your box there, they have a little booklet. In that booklet, there is an assessment that they have there for you to do. I would encourage you to do that assessment because it's really effective. It looks at your family life, it looks at your personal life, but then it looks at your work life and what are you doing to help? And so you can rate yourself, you can add up the numbers, and you can kind of get a feel. And again, when you're doing the assessment, don't do what you aspirationally want to see, but do what's reality for your life now and given those numbers. because it may open your eyes to some things in your own life. And so, in fact, Thursday I'm meeting with a pastor. He called me. He said, hey, I took that assessment on the NAM thing, and man, can you come and meet with me and let's talk about this and how I can get better in that? So you may have that realization. You're like, man, I realize I'm struggling here. So let me get some help. But that's a really effective thing. Also, that number right there, that 1-844-PASTOR-1, that's a telephone number for NAM that if you are struggling or if you need to talk to somebody, that's a number you can call. And here's a great quote that Tim Dowdy had. He said, a drowning man is not going to be concerned about rescuing others who are drowning. If you're drowning as a pastor, which can easily happen, I mean, you feel like there's a desperation there. The last thing on your mind is going to be trying to reach others. And so if that's you, man, reach out. And there's some resources here. You can reach out to me. We've got some wonderful pastoral wellness stuff that we do as a convention too. Free counseling, all kinds of stuff. But that's one of the big things. But hey, let's get healthy. But do the assessment. Find out where you are. And then we talked about that, some of the things that keep you from being effective as a witness. We've talked about that. So I want to move past that. And I want to talk to you about ways that you can be encouraged and maybe be challenged to take to another level in your own personal evangelism. And I like to call this a 5-star evangelism pastor, okay? Y'all know how college recruiting goes. They give you 3 stars or 2 stars or 4 stars, 5 stars. Well, that's kind of what this is. 5 stars is, man, this guy is killing it, right? I mean, this guy's on fire. You may look at this list in just a minute after I go through it and say, well, I'm only a 3-star or a 2-star. Hey, that's okay. But it gives you a track to say, okay, well, what can I do to get to the next star and the next, so that I can really try to be effective in my life as a pastor. Because if, like I said, again, I want you to hear this, guys. If as a leader, a pastor, you're not intentionally driving forward and having a passion yourself, your church will never get there, all right? So let me encourage you with these 5 things. We're going 5 stars right here. First thing is, a 5-star witnessing pastor, the first thing he does is he develops and practices evangelistic habits in their own life. So what does that mean? It means the pastor has in his life things that are happening all the time that are evangelistic habits. Things that are, so you know what? I want to be an evangelistic person myself. What are things that I have already set in place that are helping me to accomplish that? James Clear in his book, Atomic Habits. Y'all ever read that book? It's a secular book, but it's a great book, and I'd encourage you to read it if you don't. But he talks about if you want to be, he uses healthy person. You know, we always want to lose weight, right? We want to get the new year, hey, I want to lose 20 pounds. He says when you only have goal-inspired things, when it's just about the goal, he said what happens is you work and work and work and you eat right and you don't have pizza and you go to the gym on every day, and you get to that 20 pounds and what do? Woo, I made it. Let's go to Dairy Queen and get a Blizzard. We celebrate. And then we gain the 25 pounds of the 20 we lost, right? He says, though, what you ought to do, it's really about identity change. So you say, instead of saying I want to lose 20 pounds, you ought to say I want to be a healthy person. And so when you say I want to be a healthy person, every time I'm faced with a decision, what would a healthy person do? Well, a healthy person would go to the gym today. A healthy person would have a salad probably instead of having this. When I go to the QT, I like to call myself a connoisseur of convenience stores. So I like to go to convenience stores. I travel all the time. You need to know about any convenience store in this general area, let me know. I might have some insight for you. But I go in there, and obviously there's all these bad choices, mostly bad in a convenience store. Now, right over here, they'll have a small cabinet of fruit and, things like that. And so what would a healthy person do? Well, he would go for the fruit, right? So you're making a choice. And every time you make a healthy person choice, you're affirming your identity. So let's bring that into being an evangelistic pastor. Every time I make a choice, if I have habits developed into my life, so what could some of those habits be? Anybody? Just if you're thinking about an evangelistic habit, what would that be? What would be something in my life that could be an evangelistic habit for me? Anybody? Just throw out some ideas.
An easy one would be just praying for people that need to be saved.
Yes. Praying for lost people that you know. You know what? I'm going to make it a practice. I'm going to make it a habit that I'm praying for somebody daily that's lost that needs to be saved. Now, I might not be praying for 100 people every day, but every day I've got somebody. And I tell people, make a list of all the lost people you know. and maybe work through that list at least once a week that you're praying through that list. So you might take 2 a day or 3, whatever it is, but you're praying. That's a habit. That's a great habit. Every time I pray for a lost person, that's affirming my identity as an evangelistic pastor. All right? What's something else? Something else.
Initiate conversation.
Initiate conversations, right? So that means I got to be looking. I got to be ready. So when I'm out and about, I want to take a chance. Maybe I meet Mike here in the store and we're talking, and maybe we're in Walmart and the line's 30 deep and there's 100 registers and only one person working. Well, I can choose to either get upset and be ugly, or I can say, hey, you know what? This guy's standing right in front of me. We got a 30-minute wait. Let me just initiate a conversation with him. If I have that as a habit, I'm going to be looking for those opportunities. All right, what's another one? What's some other ones real quick?
Looking for an entry point in that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, that goes along with that. Yeah, I want to have some things in store in my mind already. I've got 4 or 5 go-tos that I can work into conversations, right? And try to help move those conversations along. Yes, sir?
I usually try to keep gospel tracts in my pocket.
That's it. You know what? That's the easy one too, right?
Well, it's silent literature, so
Yeah.
if you ain't got time to talk to them at Walmart,
Yeah.
you can just hand it the gospel. And
Yeah.
keep them going.
Do you know the value of carrying around a tool with you is? Because how many times you ever said, man, I wish I had something to give to that person. And we're like, we don't. But what if I made a habit of saying every day, I'm going to take these tracts with me. Every day I'm going to walk out of the house with these. And so I go expecting that there's going to be an opportunity to maybe talk to somebody, give a tract to somebody, follow one thing I'm not a big fan of, guys, and if you do this, I'm sorry, I don't want you to be offended here. But I'm not a big fan of putting it on top of the urinal in the men's bathroom, though. So, just don't do that. You know what? When I see that, I'm like, oh, man, I don't know about that. But anyway, I'm not saying God can't use that. I'm sure he can. You have another one?
Well, I'm just thinking, sometimes we have, as a pastor, we have opportunities to establish relationships.
Yeah.
Other times we don't. It's that quick thing.
Yeah.
Have that track.
That's right. That's right. There's great value in that. And again, that's something simple, right? That's simple. I can have that. And I want it. So by my bed or wherever I'm seeing the last thing before I leave my house, I want to have some tracts or a box of tracts there so I don't forget. I want to make it as part of my regular routine. All right, so somebody else with a habit.
How about a scheduled time to do evangelism?
Brother, he's on top of it. He's on fire. In fact, you're going to see that in one of the stars on being a 5-star pastor right there. Yeah, he's a ringer, man. Y'all brought in a ringer on me right here, yeah. That's good, though. Yeah, we'll talk some more about that in just a minute. That's a great point. You have one?
I think we need to invite vulnerability.
Yeah. So just being real with people, I don't have to be the perfect guy all the time and have all the answers, and that's huge, when you talk to people. Yeah. Rod, what about you?
You got to study your environment.
Yeah.
In the community.
Yeah. So it's a habit. So what if it's a habit? Some of you guys probably like to do a little exercise, or that's good for us anyway. We should be. What if I made it a habit to say, you know what, I'm going to walk around my neighborhood at night, maybe 3 times a week. And what if, as I'm walking around my neighborhood, I'm looking for cues about people. I'm trying to meet people if they're out in their yard. I'm trying to meet people that come by. I'm trying to pray for each of my neighbors as I'm doing that. That's an evangelistic habit. I want to reach my neighborhood. Bo?
One thing I would add is frequenting the same spots. So
Yes.
Restaurants.
Very good.
Waiters and staff.
Very
coffee
good.
shops,
Yeah.
Grocery stores.
Get to know them.
Most convenient spot, finding that one spot you
Yeah.
actually can build relationships.
That's beautiful.
Benefits.
Beautiful.
There's a lady, a waitress over in Rock Marsh
Uh-huh.
that buys me and my wife lunch once a month
Yeah.
because we went over there and began a conversation, led her to Christ.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's a benefit.
That's a wonderful thing. Hey, pastors, you know what? You know what is a great habit that you can produce in your life? Every time you go out to eat at a restaurant and you have a waiter or waitress that's waiting on you, when they bring you your food or whenever it might be, hey, you know what? We're about to pray over our meal. Is there anything we can pray specifically for you about? Do you know what that's done so many times, man? I've had people start crying right there. But that's just an easy habit. I'm there. I'm at the restaurant. I'm eating. They're serving. They're coming to my table. And so I'm just, but just habits like that. It's things that I'm going to do all the time.
As you go.
And so what's going to happen is every time I choose to do one of those things, it's affirming my identity as an evangelistic person. So it's helping me. James Clear in that book, y'all might have heard this because this kind of hit the mainstream. But he talks about getting 1% better every day. And so that's just what, every time you make a vote, I'm being more effective as an evangelist. So develop and practice evangelistic habits in your life. That's number one for a 5-star pastor. Number two, my man back there, schedules time in their weekly schedule for the sole purpose of witnessing and outreach. Pastors, I was 16 years, I was pastor of a church, okay? I know it's busy. I know there's a lot going on. I know you have a lot of sermons to prepare. I know you have a lot of people to deal with. I know you have a lot of stuff. But this intentionality of saying, you know what, at least 1 hour a week, at least, I'm going to mark off in my schedule, Tuesdays at 2 o'clock is going to be focused on nothing but witnessing and outreach. So, what would that look like? Well, could be going to the coffee shop and go every week at that hour, and you're meeting people, and you're talking to people, and you're sharing with people, and you're building relationships with people at that coffee shop. It could be that I'm going to go home and meet my neighbors and walk around my neighborhood a little bit for an hour. It could be that, you know what, most churches, now some of you might have cleaned all your rolls out and you got them lean and mean. Most Southern Baptist churches anyway have bloated rolls, you know, all these people on your roll that the FBI couldn't find, you know, if they started looking for them. Well, what if in that hour, because here's what I think, a lot of those people that are on your roll that have never showed up, they are probably lost, a lot of them. So what if I started calling them on this, hey, kid, I'd love to get together for coffee or something, if y'all could do that. Love to come by. I mean, I'd love just to talk to you. But I began to set appointments with some of these people that I've never seen before, but are on my church roll, probably lost. That was my favorite thing as a pastor, to go to Kroger in our area, in our neighborhood. I'd walk around, I'd be gone an hour. My wife's like, what in the world? You just got 2 things. You got an hour. I said, that's where I meet people. I'm just talking to people. But I'd love to say, hey, man, what's your name? And if they'd start talking, we'd get around. Hey, do you have a church that you go to here in the area? Well, I go to Lawrence Drive. That's the name of my church. I'd be like, really? I said, who's the pastor there, man? I'm always so I'd get them going, man. But that was my favorite thing, because, you know, then you say, well, I've been the pastor there for 12 years. So it's like, oh, that, and when they have beer in their car. You ever run into one of your members that has beer in their car, and they're looking, they're like, oh, well, hey, pastor, I don't know what you do. But anyway, I digress. I'm sorry. But listen, having time every week. Do you know another big thing that was in my church? I had a lot of ladies that came to church that their husbands did not come to church. And so what if I began to reach out to those men? Hey, I'd love to take you to lunch one day. And just that could be your hour. So there's 100 things, but having something on your schedule every week. Now, why is it important to get it on your schedule? You'll do it, right? And pastors, I know that there are emergencies. Anybody ever have an emergency as a pastor? Somebody dies or somebody goes to the hospital and you got to go. But here's what I found for me personally. If I have put it on my schedule, I'm much more likely, if an emergency comes up at that time, to move it somewhere else. If it's not on my schedule, it's just in my mind up here, I usually don't get around to do it again if it gets messed up. And so I'm saying every week, put that on your schedule. Like I say, it could be Tuesday afternoon. Whenever, it doesn't matter when it is. But have a time. Why is that important? Because, again, it keeps me focused. Helps me. So that's the second thing. Schedules, time in your weekly schedule. Number 3. Jimmy mentioned this right off the bat. But identify, pray for, and seek to cultivate relationships with those in your circle of influence. Now, I want you to think about your circles of influence for just a minute. What are your circles of influence? Well, pastors, can I just caution you on this? You know this. If you're not careful, a pastor's only circle of influence can become the church house. Because all I ever do is talk to members, meet with members. I'm always there, always doing that. I never get out of my office. And if we're not careful, when that happens, I don't know any lost people. Or I'm not out there with people. So as a pastor especially, you have to be intentional about getting in other areas where you have movement. So now, but everybody has circles of influence. Your family, not just your immediate family, but your extended family. You may have lost people in your extended family or your immediate family. Your friends, you may have had friends for years that have not accepted Christ. Well, those are people I want to identify. You may have some, obviously, neighbors that are lost that you need to reach out to and get to know a little bit so you can begin to develop that relationship. You may have co-workers. I'm just kidding. If you're at the church, hopefully all your people are saved there. But but you got to find, and then finding other places. You know, one thing I found that helps me is I've joined a gym. I know you can tell by this physique that this guy's killing it. No, but you know why I go to the gym? Because lost people are there. And I get to meet lost people when I go to the gym. And then what my brother said over here, Bo, I have convenience stores that I go to all the time. There's a BP station right by my house. I went there this morning on the way up here, going to get my Diet Coke out of the fountain. But I know everybody that works at that BP. And I'm praying for everybody that works at that BP. And I've shared Christ with a couple of them. And I'm going to share Christ with all of them. And I want to see all of them saved. Why? Because that's part of my circle of influence. So anywhere I go, what about the ballpark where your kids or grandkids play ball? Man, that team and that coach and that. But so there's people everywhere. But identify those folks. Begin to pray intentionally for those folks. And look for ways to begin conversations with them. I'm not saying every time you come up to a person, you hit them over the head with the gospel and, you know, got your family Bible, beating them down with it. I'm saying, but you want to look for those opportunities. And you know one good thing my buddy here said? As a pastor, do you know what advantage you have as a pastor in this? Is that when people hear that you're a pastor, they kind of expect that you might say something. You know, they expect that this might be on your mind and your heart. So guys, we have a little bit of an advantage to the average layperson in our church because we kind of have a natural bridge. Oh, what do you do? Oh, let me tell you what I do. You know, so I'm just saying. So the number 3 thing, identify, pray for, and seek to cultivate relationships with those in your circle of influence. Again, I'm a big guy on writing them down. Because you might have, I know 5 people that are lost, and you have them up here. But the chance of you ever really praying for them or really ever being intentional about reaching them kind of is not too great. But when I write them down, and maybe I've got my list on my mirror when I'm getting ready every morning, and I'm looking at those lost people, and I'm seeing their names up there, and I've been praying for them. As I'm praying for them, and as I run into them, oh, hey, buddy. Man, I've been praying for Buddy to get saved. Man, he's lost. You know, so every time I begin to see him, then I begin to think about the fact that God's placed him in my life to help me to be a witness to him. So, identifies. Number 4, has an accountability partner in the area of witnessing. Has an accountability partner in the area of witnessing. Pastors, I know sometimes it's hard to find people you can really talk to or share with because you're the pastor and everybody thinks you should have it all together and you don't have any problems and you're a spiritual giant and all those things. But you got to have somebody that you can be accountable to. Now, I said in this area, obviously it can be in every area. I mean, I know in the times that I've had accountability relationships in my life, these have been my best times of growth. They've been my best times of effectiveness because it helps. But especially in the area of evangelism. Find somebody, another pastor, that you can get together and say, hey, man, I want to be better in sharing my faith and being a witness, and you may want to be better too. Could we get together once in a while? Could we call each other? Could we pray for each other in that area? Can we call each other maybe when I have an opportunity and I'm going to meet this guy at 12 o'clock to share the gospel with him at lunch, and will you pray for me during that time? And maybe will you call me that afternoon to make sure, see how it went, because that might give me that little extra oomph at lunch to get across the goal line of sharing the gospel. But we need accountability because, again, I believe there's nothing less that the enemy wants you to do than sharing your faith. I believe that's the number 1 thing he doesn't want you to do. And so even with the best intentions many times, we can fall short. Oh, man, I should have done that. I'll do it next week. I'll do it next week. I'll do it next week. And then a year's by and I hadn't done it, right? Because it's just distraction. So accountability helps me to stay focused, helps me move forward. We can talk about what habits we're developing in evangelism together and pray for each other about that. So have an accountability partner. And then number 5, develop a plan to lead your church to be an army of witnesses. Develops a plan. So if you're going to be a 5-star pastor, evangelistic pastor, I'm going to develop and practice evangelistic habits in my own life. I'm going to schedule time in my weekly schedule for the sole purpose of witnessing outreach. I'm going to identify, pray for, and seek to cultivate relationships with those in my circle of influence. I'm going to have an accountability partner in this area. But 5thly, I'm going to develop a plan so that it helps move my church and mobilizes my members to be out there sharing the good news of Jesus. All right? So take just a minute. See how many stars maybe you're already doing. All right? How many stars are you currently seeing true about your own life? And then think about what do I need to do to get more stars going? If I'm at 2 stars now, what can I do to begin to add a 3rd star? What's the next step I need to take personally as a pastor, as a leader in my church? If I'm at 4, what can I do to get to 5? Think about that for just a second. And again, one of the things that will help you to stay focused on this is to have a partner, an accountability person. I know Jimmy would love to be an encouragement to you. I love to be an encouragement to you. Like I said, I have some groups that I do that meet once a month, or just 3 pastors at a time, that we encourage and we hold each other accountable and disciple in that area. So you can find that help, all right? So let's think about that. All right, so I know we got about 25 more minutes to go. So here's what I want to do. Number 5, y'all see what number 5 was, right? Develops a plan to lead his church to be an army of witnesses. Here's what I want to spend the rest of the time on. I want to talk to us about what would that plan look like for my church. Now, here's the good news. This is not a cookie cutter approach, okay? So it doesn't matter how big your church is. It doesn't matter if you're contemporary or traditional. It doesn't matter. None of that matters in developing this evangelistic plan. Because we want every plan to be crafted for your church in your context at this time, okay? So whether you're a traditional church that's been around for 150 years, or you're a church start that's been around for 3 months, or whether you're a huge church that runs 1,000, or you have 40 in your church, we want this plan to fit to where you are, okay? So I'm going to go over some of the logistics, some of the principles of this as we think about this. But as we begin, here's what I want you to think about. The goal, again, I mentioned this earlier. The goal is to change the culture of your church. If we were honest, probably all of us would have to say, even if we have a few things going on like outward events and maybe we do some service things, but if we were to take the general nature of our people, the nature of our church, most of us would probably have to say our church is more inward focused than outward focused. Could we agree on that? Most people think you agree on that? Because here, let me ask you this question. This will help you. Pastors, have you ever, any pastor in here had anybody come up to them and upset about something? Raise your hand if you've had somebody in your church come up and upset. Okay, right? That's just about every pastor to a T. Now, here's the second part of that question. When they came up and they were upset at you, what was the general nature of their problem?
Control or personal preference?
Yes, control, and it had to do with the church, right? Pastor, you moved the flowers off the front of the church. I mean, I am so mad. Those flowers have been up there for 100 years. Let me tell you one of let me tell you one of my stories as a pastor. I had a lot of them, but this is just one of them. We had done a complete remodel. Our sanctuary, like gutted down to the frame and rebuild the foyer, everything. Well, we had a hall like this. If this was coming out of our foyer right here, we had this hall that went straight back. So we did the foyer, we did the worship center, everything was brand new. This hall, the contractor comes to me and says, hey man, the painters are here, the flooring guys are here. They said it wouldn't be nothing just to run the flooring down the hallway and paint, make everything line up. That makes sense, right? Does that make sense to y'all? Everything just looks the same and we got it all. And he said this. He said, man, it's going to be about $5,000 if we do it now. Now, if they leave and have to come back, it's going to be more. So would you want to go ahead and do it? But I think because I've saved money in other areas, it's really not going to cost us anything. Not going to go over budget. That's a no-brainer, right? Yeah, man. Go for it. So we do it. Looks great. Looks awesome. Basically free. Getting the deacons meeting. Well, we are just fired up. What are y'all upset about? Well, you painted and did flooring down the thing that we hadn't talked about that. Well, does it look good? Oh, well, yeah, it looks good. It didn't cost us any money. Y'all know that, right? Yeah, we know that. What's the problem? Well, you just didn't ask us and talk to us about it. I'm like, I'm just like, right. But that's the nature. That's right. But here's what the point I'm trying to make. Most of the issues you have that people come to you about is something to do with the church. It's a personal preference. You change the music. You change the color of the carpet. You change this. Pastors, let me ask you this. Has any of your members ever come to you mad angry and upset, and they said, Pastor, I'm so mad because we're not reaching enough lost people. You know why? Because we're inwardly focused. This is my church. This is about me. We're not worried about the people out there. Guys, in your deacons meeting. Now, in some churches you may have this, but for the most part, most of the time in the deacons meeting, they're not asking you about, well, hey, how many lost people are we reaching? Right. They're not asking those questions. And so the pressure is, well, I better answer their questions that they have, or they're going to try to run me on a rail. But here's the deal, because most of our churches are inward. So the goal of this plan is to begin to change the culture. Now, we're going to talk about developing a one-year plan, but a one-year plan will not change the culture of your church completely. But here's what we're trying to do. If I can begin to move them and be strategic, and after that 1 year of that plan in place, I can see that my culture has changed a few degrees in the right direction, that's a win. And I'm going to re-up for the next year. And so year over year, as I'm intentional and continuous in my plan, down the road, I'm going to have a completely different church because we've been moving them. Again, you remember that gentle push I was talking about? We're not trying to steamroll people with this, because if you go in there and say, hey, we're not going to do this anymore the way we've been doing it. We're going to change the worship. We're going to change the prayer time. We're going to change the way we do Sunday school. You're not going to make it. So we're not doing that. We're not blowing everything up. We're saying, hey, what are you doing already? And how can we weave this idea of this outward focus into everything you're doing as a church? So into our worship time, into our Sunday school time, into every part of our... And I want to develop a plan that's going to help move my people. Some of you have seen this before, and this isn't right on the board, it's back there. But anyway, just picture this in your mind, okay? Everybody in your church is on a scale somewhere when it comes to evangelism. Just a line. On one end of the line, you've got people who we would call scared Stan or apathetic Al. They don't want to do it. They're not going to do it. They're firm set. I will never share my faith. I won't even invite people to church. That's how bad I am. And then on the other end, you have a person we call Gospel Gracie. She's sharing her faith regularly. She's inviting people to church. You have some people in your church like that, right? Everybody has a few. But here's the deal. Everybody in your church is somewhere on this scale. Now, in most churches that I've talked to over this time that I've been doing this, most of their people are closer to scared Stan, apathetic Al than they are Gospel Gracie. So the plan that we're developing, what we're going to ask ourselves is, will my plan, I want to have a plan that's going to move everybody in the direction of Gospel Gracie, no matter where they are. Because I need scared Stan to move, to be more evangelistically minded folks in his life. Now, they're not all going to respond the same way, right? Or at the same time level, or at the same speed. So my plan is going to hit every area, because I want to get, no matter if they're way down here at the very end, or they're at the middle, or even if they're close to Gospel Gracie, because of my strategic plan, I want everybody to move in this direction over the course of time. Because I want to see everybody get down here eventually, and as we reach new people, I want them to be encouraged to be evangelistic, okay? So that's the goal of our plan right here, all right? So, 2 key characteristics. I know we're only on page 1. I'm going to speed it up here in just a minute. 2 key characteristics. These are, man, I will die on this hill right here. It must be intentional and it must be continuous. Again, we have made evangelism something we do every once in a while. We got to change that. Evangelism has to become at the heartbeat of who we are. That we don't just do evangelism here and there. That's just who we are. We're an evangelistically people. And so it has to be a part of our DNA, a part of our culture. We want an outwardly focused culture. And so that's the question at the bottom. What are we doing to move all of my people to be more evangelistically minded, more evangelistically focused? And again, for scared Stan, who's never done anything to share his faith, never done anything to invite a person to church, has never even thought about it, for him, a win to be more evangelistically minded and evangelistically focused is maybe he invited somebody to come to Easter this Easter Sunday because we really helped him and we really focused in for him. That's a win for him. Doesn't mean he's all the way to Gospel Gracie yet, but I've moved him a little bit. And I don't want to leave him here. I'm going to keep having that gentle push on his back. So you get the picture here? We're trying to develop a plan that's going to move everybody to be more gospel focused and intentional. All right, page number 2. Woohoo! We made it to page number 2. I'm going to run through these elements pretty quick, okay? So I want to develop my plan. I believe every church should have a plan that is intentional and continuous when it comes to evangelism, all right? So here's some elements that you need to be a part of your plan. 7 things I want to share with you. And I'm going to run through them. Some of them are pretty basic that you understand quickly. Most of them are. So I won't spend a lot of time, and then we'll get down to kind of the questions that you can ask yourself to help begin to work your plan. All right, so first one is this, praying for lost people by name. Jimmy mentioned that earlier.